everybody. It's so great to be here. Thank you so much for the incredible welcome that all of us, the speakers and the judges, have gotten. It's really been an incredible experience to be part of this weekend. So I'm going to talk today not about soul about Kiva. And Kiva is very much about stories. And it's so much of what we do is framing how people tell their stories in order to incentivize action, in order to share with the world and with the community about what they do and what they care about. So I thought that I would start with my own story. My story with Kiva starts on this mountain on your right. I was living and working in Costa Rica. This was 2005, right around when Kiva was getting started. And I was working with kids. I was working with a network of schools across Central America that was focused on ESL, education, English as a second language. And it was a really incredible experience to be working in communities all across the region and working with the children and with their families. But it was also a fairly lonely time for me. I had moved away from my home community. I had fairly recently finished college. And so I was sort of living on that mountain and was a bit alone. I felt a bit alone. And I had heard from a friend about Kiva, and I had heard just kind of the bare bones story at that time. We were just getting started, and there was some early press in some blogs in San Francisco in the Bay Area where we began. And I thought, wow, what an incredible way to use the internet and to connect with people in order to sort of support each other and really to kind of make the world a little bit of a smaller place. And so I wrote in to Kiva, and at that time I think there was probably one email address, like info@kiva.org or something like that. And I said, look, I live on the mountain in Costa Rica, and I don't know what I can do, but I'd really like to help out. And I think this is an amazing thing. And of course, I created a lender account, and I'll talk about how you do that in a moment. And I said, look, I speak Spanish, and maybe I can help you find individuals who need money, or maybe I can be involved in some way. And what I ended up doing is becoming a translator, one of our first translators on the Kiva website. And so they gave me a login to the back end. And what I would do is I'd go home at night, and I would translate stories from entrepreneurs all across Latin America who had incredible tales of overcoming hardship, of building enterprises for themselves and their families. And so, from my home, I would log into the Kiva website. This is kind of a bare bones frame of it. And I read about entrepreneurs. And so one of the first loans that I ever translated was Luz. She's 24 years old, has 4 children, lives in Peru, and is a single mom. And she needed $200 in order to buy inventory for her restaurant. This is one of her employees. And she also has a boutique in sort of on the other side of town. And I remember reading about her, and I was 23 at the time, and thinking, my goodness, she has 4 kids, runs 2 businesses, and only needs $200 in order to grow it. And what a powerful thing to connect with people in order to support this woman. And so Kiva raises money in shares of $25. So really only 8 people need to support Luz in order for her to start and grow her business. I also read about Cesar. He's in Ecuador. And so Cesar is a preacher. And he spent years sharing sort of the word of God in penitentiaries across Ecuador. And one day he was giving a talk to inmates, and one of the inmates said, "Oh, those are really nice shoes that you have. Can you sell them to me?" And he, I don't know if he sold them at that moment, but sort of a light went off in his head, and he said, "Wow, this is kind of an enterprising opportunity. What if I become a salesman to inmates across Ecuador?" And so he actually went to his local microfinance institution in Guayaquil, in Ecuador, and borrowed $475, bought a bunch of shoes and some shirts, and started a business selling to inmates. And I thought, wow, is that kind of enterprising? And then Julia worked as a domestic worker for about 15 years. And she had to go back to work when her husband died and she became a widow. And for a decade, she set aside money each month so that she could eventually open a store such as this. And then she needed a loan in order to buy inventory for her store. And so she came to her local organization and borrowed $475 in order to build up her store, which was always her dream to be self-employed. So stories like this, sitting up on the mountain in Costa Rica, had an incredible impact on me, both in kind of feeling part of a community, a global community, but more importantly, being able to actually engage in that in a meaningful way. So for me, originally it was translation, but over time, I built up an account on Kiva with $25 and then $50, and picked individuals that I resonated with and was able to support them with my own funds, and then hear about how their businesses were going as they grew. And so, fast forward a year or so, and table of contents. I came back to San Francisco. I grew up in the Bay Area, and and I said, well, gosh, I would love to really meet these people that I've been communicating with online. And so I showed up at the Kiva office, and this is kind of the original team, and then there's me kind of inserting myself. And this was over winter break, so I actually had every intention of going back to Costa Rica and continuing my work there. And I was so enamored by the energy and the spirit and the creativity of what was happening in this little one-room office that I kept showing up, and I just showed up every day. And I said, what can I do today, and how can I help? And one day turned into 1 week, turned into 1 month, and eventually, I harassed them enough and stuck around enough that I became indispensable. And so I think for a lesson for folks, who want to get involved in social enterprise, we often hear from founders, and we often hear from CEOs and heads of company. I'm not a founder, and I'm not the CEO, but I do feel very, very passionately about what we do. And there's something really powerful about when you find what you care about and what you love, just stick around and keep harassing them. And maybe it's one organization, maybe it's another, but eventually, if you have enough passion for what you do, you'll figure out a way to get involved. So that's exactly the story that I had. I actually never went back to Costa Rica, and I volunteered for about 6 months and drew down all of my savings, lived on my brother's couch for the whole time. And this was at a time when Kiva was really just getting started. At that point, we had made about $1 million in loans. I remember we had a huge party to celebrate that. And it was a really big milestone. And we kind of grew from there. So what do we do? Well, the headers are a little funny. Our mission is to connect people through lending to alleviate poverty. And so breaking that down a little bit, we really feel connection is such a powerful piece of what we do. The internet is an enabler of so many things, and it's an enabler of consumption, it's an enabler of connection, it's great for online dating, it's great for all sorts of things. But one thing that we've been able to tap into it for is in order to give people an outlet to either replace their giving or to find a way to kind of, when you think about the big problems of poverty and inequality, often if you live in a comfortable city, maybe you're middle class, maybe you've gotten an education, and it's kind of hard to figure out how you can have an impact in the world. And I think from the lender perspective, one of the things that Kiva is really great at is saying, look, if you contribute $25, it goes to the individual that you select, and you can follow how they're doing, and then you get updates and you actually get your money back. And so when we think kind of big picture, we really envision a world where through Kiva and through other platforms like Kiva, everybody holds the power to create opportunity for themselves and for each other. And so, how do we do this? So there's really kind of 4 components. whether to start their business or to grow their business. There's an ecosystem of microfinance organizations that has been built around this need. In order to service this need, they need capital. And many of these organizations, such as Hasbank, which is in Mongolia, are unable to grow at the pace that they would want to meet the demand that they are seeing because it's really expensive in order to find money. And so what Kiva does is we connect with those local partners in order to connect through those entrepreneurs. And the local organizations maintain kind of the direct relationship with the entrepreneurs. They post profiles on the Kiva website. And then internet lenders who form part of the Kiva community can come online, select who they want to support. And then we funnel that money, as you saw in the Pedro video, through the local enterprise to the entrepreneur. So you can see kind of along the bottom here that the flows that are happening real time on the site are not only money, but also information. And so all of the lenders that we have on Kiva lend at a 0% interest rate. They get no money for what they do. So it's very much a social return. And we think that people are really incentivized to do this because of the connection and because of the information that we're able to share on the site. So a little bit about our growth path. Right now, we're at about $400 million that we've lent over about 7 years now. The average loan size on Kiva is about $400 US. So we have all sorts of sectors, retail, agriculture, you name it, we have on the Kiva site. We do this through a network of institutional partners. We have 170 organizations that we're working with across the world in order to source the entrepreneurs that you see on Kiva. And about 82% of the clients that we fund are women. And we have a little under 900,000 lenders. And so these lenders are, raise your hand, is anybody in the audience a Kiva lender? Front rows representing, second row, okay, back there, awesome. So the minimum amount to lend on Kiva is $25. And we have lenders from all across the world, over 100 countries. Most of our lenders are from the United States and Europe, but we do have lenders from across the world. And our lenders really self-organize around whatever incentivizes them, whatever is inspiring to them. So down the street from my house, there is a bakery. And the owner of the bakery has a portfolio that he's built up over time of other bakers from across the world. And then as he gets repaid back, he recycles that money in the Kiva system. So here's a little bit about where we work. And here's a little bit of our statistics. So, what we've really done over the last 7 years is built a movement of people, both who want to contribute and also people who need money. And really, Kiva is all about connections. As we think about, what we want to do, it's really important for us that we kind of embed ourselves within the broader ecosystem of the microfinance industry and also of the larger banking community. And so the green bubble there represents the loans that we've done on the Kiva site today. The yellow bubble represents the loans that have been made through microfinance institutions globally. And then the blue bubble represents the need of people who need access to financial services and are otherwise excluded from banks, so about 2.5 billion people. So I think a lesson for all of the entrepreneurs in the room is really that no matter how big you get, and Kiva is often cited as a really kind of big growth story, you're always embedded within an ecosystem. And so you really want to think critically about what role you want to play in that ecosystem and how you want to become either an influencer or if you can grow big enough to kind of serve all those needs, that's a great thing, but it's very difficult to do, right? So when we think about what we want to do going forward as a social enterprise, we realize that there are many people in the blue bubble that are not able to access credit at the terms that they need it. And that's for a number of reasons, but many microfinance institutions have products or services that are not well adapted to the needs of the poor. And if we categorize those, one of the areas that we kind of call it the 4 Ps. So populations are often left out from existing microfinance institutions, whether they are perceived as risky or they're stigmatized or they're hard to get to, and startup businesses often fall into this category. Places that are miles and miles down a dirt road, often people living in very rural areas or in post-conflict areas like South Sudan are excluded from microfinance institutions. Various types of products, such as the D-Lite products, that many people can't afford on a cash basis. Often it's very difficult to get microfinance institutions or other lending institutions to offer loans for kind of pro-poor products. And then people have difficulty kind of affording prices, so interest rates are fairly high in microfinance. And so, when we think about what role we want to play in the future, realizing that really we're just this green bubble and that there is this entire blue universe out there, we really think about, enabling our lender community to be the innovators in financial services and to try new things with the idea of kind of how can we test and learn what financial products work well, and then share those learnings with the global community. And so as we go forward, in order to serve more people, we're actually looking at how we can expand the channels through which we work from just microfinance institutions to also include social enterprises and also a direct channel where we are completely disintermediating our lending. And so, through this, through these various channels, we are testing loans that you don't see in the microfinance community. So loans that are 5, 6, 10 years long for students. The gentleman down there is in Kenya. He got a loan for 11 years on Kiva at a 2% interest rate with a 5-year grace period. And that's something that we believe that the internet community is really well positioned to fund because our lenders don't need a financial return, and they're also, much more concerned with sending someone to school than necessarily being repaid, though the repayment piece is obviously important. And so there are many characteristics of the Kiva capital that we want to use in order to innovate. The 0% interest piece is important. We've also built a network of volunteers around the world that help our field partners in order to test and learn with new products. And another characteristic of Kiva lenders is that they actually take on the risk of individual borrowers on the Kiva site. So if this gentleman in Kenya is unable to repay, we would ask him to tell us about his story and why, but ultimately that default risk actually sits with the Kiva lenders. So this is a really unique type of capital that doesn't really exist in the markets today. It's powered by people. It's not powered by banks. It's not powered by financial interests. It's really kind of powered by the heart. And so, we don't take that lightly. And when we think about what we want to do with Kiva over time, we really want to accelerate. Innovation in financial services so that, we can kind of de-risk different products and different services that we find that the microfinance institutions are unwilling or unable to offer. And on the Kiva site, if we are able to suss out, look, yes, students are able to repay, or farmers, when given the right product mix, can repay at the right terms, then we can kind of accelerate the adoption of new types of loan products that serve the poor. So it's a new type of money. It's powered by connections and by stories, and we really believe that that this type of capital will allow us to expand opportunity, not just for ourselves and for the borrowers on our site, but really for the world community. So we hope you'll join us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have a few questions from the audience. Can you please? The first one is, how can you manage to be the very low rate of NPL, non-performing loans? Mm-hmm. And does it vary between countries?
Yeah, so we have a 99% repayment rate, and I talked a lot in the presentation about the role of the partner. In some ways, a high repayment rate means that we're not actually taking enough risk,
and that we're not innovating enough with different types of products, and that, in fact, we're sort of funding products that we know pay well. Microfinance institutions are very, very good at serving the poor and figuring out the way to maintain high repayment rates. Short-term loans, repayments that are as frequent as weekly, help to keep repayment rates high. Women tend to pay better than men. Businesses that have fairly even cash flows are also, so someone who's a buyer and a seller who has a small shop tends to be able to pay loans very quickly because their income streams are really predictable. So that's one way we've been able to keep repayment rates high, is through our field partner network.
So you have another
Thank
question?
you. Another question would be, does Kiva exist in Thailand?
Yeah, so we just actually launched in Thailand a couple of months ago with a very small organization that works with the Hill Tribes. So we're funding Malabri, Hill Tribes, individuals who are weavers and make hammocks and then sell them on the international markets. We're actually funding the inputs in order to make those hammocks. So we've done, a handful of loans in Thailand, but we're looking to do more.
Great.
Yeah.
I think those are the questions that we have more questions.
Yeah, we have more questions.
Do you think female is more credible to return the loan? I think she just said that.
Yeah.
There's a statistic to prove that, right?
Yeah, women tend to pay much higher than men.
Yes. There you go. What is the secret of 99? Okay, we addressed that already. Are there any competitors globally?
Yeah, so crowdfunding, there are a number of sites out there that raise money via the crowd. In other words, many people contributing to one project or to one individual. Many of them are in the donation space, so some of you may have heard of Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and others. There are also some organizations that are doing lending. MyC4 in the U.S. comes to mind, Baby Loan. There are some smaller U.S.-centered interventions, including Prosper and Lending Club. But much of the crowdfunding kind of buzz has been around donations, because it's hard to get repaid.
True. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Is there any other questions that the audience would like to share? No?
It's okay.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
for your
much.
story.